Well, thank you. Today is Thursday, April 16th, 2015. We're in Tampa, Florida at the AmSECT International Conference. My name's Mark Caruso, and we're going to conduct an interview with Craig Vocelka, someone who's been in the field for a long time and has been very active in AmSECT over the years. And we really want to find out a little bit about your experiences in perfusion, Craig. The first question I have for you is, what were the circumstances that led you to become a perfusionist?
Wow, thanks, Mark. I was a respiratory therapist. I was working at Ben Taub in Houston. It's the county hospital, the trauma center. And I used to have lunch with a friend of mine who was an anesthesiologist. And a lot of times we'd have lunch up in the dome in Ben Taub. And while Ben Taub didn't do a lot of heart cases, they would do occasionally. And the first heart case I ever saw was Arthur Bell doing a mitral valve replacement. And the thing that I remembered is there was this guy sitting over running this machine. And he was the only guy Dr. Bell didn't yell at the whole time. It was like he kept going, "Mike, everything fine? Everything fine?" And he kept asking that all the time. And the second thing I noticed is that the guy didn't wear socks. And I thought, this is the perfect job for me. And but seriously, it was like I was just intrigued by this machine. And so I looked into it and found out about perfusion and started trying out how to become one. And this was back in the early 70s. I was a respiratory therapist from 72 to 75 when I went to perfusion school. And so I started writing letters and because I was still the time where some people could OJT, but there were schools that I think the three schools at the time were Ohio State, Texas Heart, and South Carolina wasn't the university yet. I think it was called Trident or something, had a school. And so I applied, and the first time I got rejected because Charlie didn't want to take anybody from Houston because he didn't want to feel like he had to hire somebody if you were local. And so I said, I'll be back. And he told me not to waste my time, and I did it anyway. And second time I got in. So I started perfusion school in July of 75.
And that was at Texas Heart Institute under Charlie Reed's tenure as the chief.
Definitely. You know, Charlie was the man and running the school, and it was Charlie and Diane were Charlie was the director, Diane was the associate director, and Terry Crane was the clinical associate director.
Really? Terry was there at that time? Yeah. And do you think Charlie, in all fairness to him, remembered that you had previously applied and been rejected?
Oh, Charlie didn't forget anything. I mean, you know Charlie better than I did, and Charlie didn't forget anything. So yeah, I'm damn well aware that he knew that I had. And as I got to know Charlie over the years, I think he had his own way of testing people, and I think the showing up again proved how much I wanted to do it or something. I think got me in.
Sure. And the training period at that time was how long, Craig?
It was 6 months.
6 months.
And it's funny now because when I talk to students, they're all doing 2-year programs and things, and I remind them that we didn't know much back then. I said, basically it was pretty simple. You don't pump air, make blue blood red, and you're ready to graduate once you got that down. I said, we really didn't know anything. I mean, I look back over the years, the 40 years now, and nobody talked about inflammation when we started. I can remember people would talk about cytokines and going, yeah, it sounds interesting, but we don't really know what they do. Blood, it was like, that was no issue. You need to transfuse, and it was whole blood. We didn't split blood back then.
Really?
And so it's been a really intriguing evolution, both in what we've learned and how we practice over the years.
Well, we may get into some of those aspects a little later. I want to still focus on your time at THI. One of the great advantages of going to school at THI at that time, of course, was it was probably the busiest place in the world.
Well, it was. I was there the year we did the 5,000 plus cases.
Really? 5,000 cases in 1 year?
And I remember it because Dr. Cooley was really proud of achieving this, but it was like, how does a surgeon this was before hospitals and surgeons advertised like they do today. So he had Charlie send out a Christmas card to all the perfusionists, knowing it would get to the surgeons, and that the word would get out that he had done 5,000 cases that year. It was, and back to the 6 months. As a student in the 6 months, I pumped 122 cases and probably watched another 80 of my classmates, because one would watch and one would pump cases. And so you did a lot. It was not unusual at Texas Heart at that point in time to do 30 cases in a day. And, and it was just, in some sense, it was a great system. Some refer to it as the heart factory, but it was down to a science of, there was very little wasted motion, wasted time. I know today, one of the things that drives me and most people crazy is the turnover time between cases. And there were HAs ready to come in, clean the room, and get started again. And so we were able to do those kind of cases. And everything we were doing then was pretty much straightforward cabbages.
Sure.
3-vessel, one on the left, one on the right, one in the middle was the theory. And so it was like a lot of cases. The patients were younger, not near as sick as we see today. But overall, looking back there at that time, perfusion was 20 years old at that point, or bypass was 20 years old at that point. And just to look at really how little progress had been made to that point, when you asked me, or I was asked to do this interview as a pioneer, I said, I'm not really a pioneer. I consider myself more of a second generation. But when I look back and look at the progress that's been made, it's like, wow. And,
you were a pioneer.
And to hear some of the stories,
yes,
is just great.
Now, with the tremendous caseload at Texas Heart, two questions here, Craig. Did you get much pediatric experience?
Lots.
Really?
Lots of pediatric experience. Dr. Cooley was the pediatric surgeon, at least in that area, the South, that area. And it was not unusual to do, 3 kids a day. And people were coming from all over the world to Texas Heart at that time. I remember one day in particular doing 5 kids in one day, and they were very short pump runs. In fact, there was more stress and more energy tearing the pump down and setting up for the next case. There was a couple of primary closures of ASDs, maybe one VSD, and then there was one big tetralogy or something. But the VSDs, the ASDs rather, the primary closure, we'd be on pump 6 minutes. Dr. Cooley would go in, put in a stitch or two, and we'd be done. And then we'd tear it down, set it up again. And to watch that man operate was just, I consider one of the great gifts I've had in my life, just to
Sure.
say that I worked with him and to watch him operate.
Sure. At that time, did you use any ancillary devices now that are commonly used by perfusionists, namely intra-aortic balloon pump, ventricular assist? Tell me a little bit about how patients were handled if weaning did not go especially well.
To put in a balloon pump at that point was a major decision and a big deal. And at Texas Heart at the time, the research lab would come and put the balloon pump in. And it was like this major production as they'd roll this gigantic machine into, it was Avco or it was a big green
Everett.
Big green machine.
Yep.
And it would come in and, and it was like this big production that we were going to put this balloon pump into this patient. And, it's one of the things as I look back over the years, and now slapping in a balloon pump is nothing. But even that, there were more times where it was decided there was nothing to do. And unfortunately, the patient, wouldn't make it. So balloon pumps, there was the VAD. My remembrance of the VAD is we'd put a VAD in the Cal lab 3 times. And one day we had this patient, and bless his heart, wasn't going to make it. And Dr. Cooley said, we're going to have to try it one of these days. Let's go get it. And brought this VAD down that had been placed in 3 cows that I know of and placed it in this patient. And the first thing that I think of today is if we did something like that, the FDA SWAT team would be circling the building. There'd be guys rappelling down the halls, arresting us all, you know. But secondly, we put it in and it worked. I mean, we got the guy off the table and got him to the ICU. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. But it was like, I remember being part of that. And I sit there going, wow. And then you look at VADs today, how commonplace they are.
Yes.
And to realize that I was part of that, you know, I just feel so fortunate to have seen all this over my career.
Sure, sure. Were they doing heart transplants when you were in training?
We were not.
Okay.
You know, 75 is before the cyclosporine, and so, but right before I left Texas Heart, we've done the heart transplant. I don't think we were the first after the cyclosporine came in. I think Stanford was, if I remember. But we did it, and there's a Life magazine that's got the cover of Life magazine has a picture from the dome at Texas Heart, and I can point out my head there because
really?
I and about 74 other people I think were in that room that night, all trying to make sure that they were part of this case.
Wow. So as a student, and again, I don't want to focus too much on your training, but I think it was really the foundation for what you were to become later. What was a typical week like? Were students required to take call, Craig?
You know, in a sense, I can't say we were slave labor because we actually got a stipend when we were students, so we wouldn't be considered slave labor, but we did everything. I mean,
Really?
We took call. We had our academic assignments and our lectures. We pumped the cases. We cleaned up everything. And this is the days where we re-sterilized a lot of equipment. Everything wasn't disposable. The most infamous thing as a student at Texas Heart at that time was the millipore filter. And these filters had to be all taken apart, washed out to get all the lactate and ringers out of it. And any dextrose that might have been on this circuit. And there was a little membrane that you had to place in it, and then you had to line up the O-rings just right, or otherwise it would leak or everything. Wrap them and sterilize them. And this filter mediums came in boxes, and between each one was a piece of paper. And inevitably somebody would leave the paper in too, so as you go to recirculate your prime, the paper wouldn't filter anything and the thing would blow apart. And the way we set up, you recirculate it in a basin away from the table, not with the lines at the table.
Yes.
And then you would drain your oxygenator. As a student, you were freaking out because you had to reprime. You had your staff member, you know, overlooking you, calling you the biggest idiot in the world, and you were embarrassed. And you know, and as I said, we were doing so many cases, we were moving along, so it was like that was wasted time. And would you be ready when the surgeon was ready? And so you ended up adding all this pressure to yourself.
Yes.
And so, you know, a typical day was, you know, we'd get to the hospital somewhere around 6 or so to start getting set up for all these cases. We'd do a case, we'd go to lectures, and we'd come back and do cases in the afternoon. And then we'd do all the cleanup and the restocking and everything. And, you know, one of the things that they taught us was about taking care of your pumps. And I don't know how many times I have sat there and jacked the pump up and got the wheels to get the suture out of the wheels because, you know, there was always the inspections coming, and
Sure.
there better not be a drop of blood, and you know they knew where to look for it, and
Sure.
So we did a little bit of everything there.
Okay. Well, you alluded to textbooks and the didactic teaching. What was your primary textbook at that time, Craig?
Well, I was the first class that got to use the Reed Clark book. The red book it was affectionately referred to, and we were the first class. They had just published that book, and we were the first class to use that. You know, the lung, Como that wrote the lung, the Brown book, and then Guyton's Physiology were the 3 books that, you know, were on my desk and always open. And the red book went with you everywhere, you know, because if you had some time between cases, you were out there studying the red book.
Sure.
But I think that was helpful because stories I heard as classes before Charlie and Diane wrote the book was that, they had so many different books that they only needed a chapter or so out of. And so I felt that was a big advantage to us, to have a book, to have a reference all in one place that we
all
could go
about
to.
perfusion. Yes. Now let's transition from the time you finished your training. Where did you first go as a staff perfusionist?
I stayed at Texas Heart.
Oh, you did?
I did. And, it was funny that, on Friday before I graduated, I couldn't pump a case by myself. And Monday I'm there by myself. And it was like, I don't know what happened over the weekend. And then, because I graduated in December, and a week and a half later, I had students that I was supposedly teaching. And one of the people that have remained friends over the years, he says, we always just made fun of you because you always had the clamp in your hand. I said, because I was scared to death. Because I said, I didn't know what I was doing at that point in time. And but I knew if I clamped the line, I could save the patient.
It was almost like see one, do one, teach one, wasn't it?
It was exactly that. I mean,
that's amazing. So how long did you stay on staff at Texas Heart?
I stayed there. I graduated in December of '75 and stayed there through '77. And then went to the University of Iowa, where I had a chance to, my funding was part-time clinical perfusion and part-time research, and I got to do some research with Dr. Don Doty at the University of Iowa.
You worked with Dr. Doty.
And it was a great experience there. I mean, we did a lot of cases, and some of the people, the surgeon there, Dr. Ehrenhoff, is in that group from the Midwest that, were some of the early pioneers and stuff. And,
sure.
And my chief there in perfusion was Dan Wiltfang, who is one of the founding members of AmSECT, was at that room in Chicago when AmSECT got started and everything. And Dan could tell great stories, and learned a lot from him about being a perfusionist, dealing with surgeons, being a chief. He's been a role model for me as I went into management and became the chief perfusionist, and just was a great 2 years I got to spend there.
Sure. So after Iowa, where did you go? And how did that come about? Did you apply or were you recruited?
Iowa, I was semi-recruited. A friend of mine was working there and thought I might be good for this position. When I was in Iowa, I had a little epiphany and was going to change my course in life, and left the University of Iowa to go to the seminary the first time. And so I left Iowa, ended up back in Houston, and worked part-time at Texas Heart while I did some undergraduate in philosophy before I went to seminary. So I did 2 years part-time at Texas Heart then.
Okay.
And I went to school at the University of St. Thomas in Houston and did 2 years of philosophy. And then left Texas and went to the seminary, went to Berkeley, to the Graduate Theological Union, and didn't pump for 2.5 years.
Really? I had no idea.
And
somehow I thought your seminary years preceded your perfusion years.
Nope.
And what was the epiphany that brought you back into perfusion, Craig?
Well, as the joke is with my seminary classmates, is I took a year's leave of absence right before my final vows and forgot to go back. And then being a Roman Catholic, by this point I've met who's now my wife, and they wouldn't take me back then. It was a joke. I would call friends and they go, "You coming back?" And I go, "If Vic can come, I'll come back." And they said, "Not yet. Hey, we haven't changed that much yet." And so I, obviously didn't become a Catholic priest, and but ended up in the seminary. And then when I left the seminary, I called a classmate of mine, Vicki Howard, who was in Denver, and she happened to just have an opening at that time. It was perfect, and so I left Berkeley and went to Denver and worked there for a while.
Okay.
And then from Denver ended up back in Houston again.
Really?
For another year. So we're now to 1986. I was in Houston for the year of '86, and then the job at the University of Washington came up, and I moved to Washington in '87. I've been there since.
So tell me a little bit about how you ended up at the University of Washington. Again, was it word of mouth, or did you have to go through a big interview application process?
I was recruited. people that I had taught at Texas Heart, a couple of people were working there, and the previous chief, Gary Tarter, was getting ready to retire, and thought I would be a good candidate, and so I had never been to Seattle, and I said, well, I'll come look at it, I've never been there, and so we looked and decided I liked it, and the job seemed to have a good opportunities for me, a good chance to grow, and so I took it. Didn't know how it was going to work out or anything, and apparently it's worked out well. I've been there almost 30 years now. And,
yeah, coming up on 30 years.
And
I think one of the other things that has distinguished you at the University of Washington is that you're on the faculty, aren't you?
We are. We're non-tenure tracked faculty in the School of Medicine, the Department of Surgery, and so we're. The term the university uses for us is teaching associates.
Okay.
And so that way they don't have to put us in tenure tracks, and gives them a little leeway to, we get a contract every year, but it's a state job, and it'd be tough to get rid of us.
Sure. And how big is your team at the University of Washington, Craig?
Well, we're growing. This summer, it'll be the first time we're up to 12. When I got there were 6, and we've slowly grown over the years. Part of the growth has been just the expansion that the university, we covered the VA hospital and a community hospital that was doing hearts, didn't want to start, so they contracted with the university, and now the university has acquired the whole hospital, so it's all part of our system now. So we have the 3 hospitals. Our caseload has increased over the years. Transplants, when I got there, they had just started doing heart transplants. We now do heart, liver, lungs, and everything else you can think of that we're involved in. We've got a pretty active chemotherapy program. Mm-hmm. And so I've kept trying to find ways to keep us busy and broaden our horizon and our scope, and use our expertise in helping not only the cardiac world, but other departments in the hospital. And the latest is, of course, ECMO, which is in some ways become the new balloon pump. Back to that question.
Yes.
And, which when you used to think about putting somebody on ECMO, what a big deal it was, and now it's like, get the ECMO machine and put them on ECMO now.
Yes. So being in a university setting, and I come from a university background, was there much competition from so-called community hospitals for the cases in the Seattle area?
In Seattle, Seattle proper, there are 3 hospitals, and then in the Seattle, Tacoma, Everett area, about a 30-mile stretch on I-5, there's probably 9 hospitals that do heart surgery.
Really?
And so there's competition. We're the tertiary care center, so we get a lot of stuff nobody else wants. It's always interesting to read the histories when we're doing redos that they were operated on at another hospital first, and now they don't want them. They send them to us.
Yes.
Plus, we've got a really big adult congenital practice. I work with Dr. Edward Verrier, and he is just very gifted, and that's his main focus now is adult congenital. So we have a very large practice of adult congenitals. And
those are challenging cases, aren't they?
They are, but they're the kind of things that I love, and it's what's kept me interested in perfusion, I really think.
Well, you mentioned Dr. Verrier. Are there any other, and you mentioned Dr. Cooley, of course, you mentioned Dr. Bell very early. Are there any other surgeons that you've worked with that stand out in your mind as memorable or even having influenced you as a perfusionist, Craig?
No, I've been really, really gifted. I've worked, I think, with some of the best surgeons in the world, and I'm sure everybody's got some biases, but I mean, when I can say that I've worked with Denton Cooley, with Grady Hallman, with George Rule, Don Doty and Hans Ehrenhoff, and now Dr. Verrier, I just feel like, you start looking and you look at PubMed, and I mean, those names are well known. And, they all are unique people, all have very many different gifts and stuff. But it's just been amazing to get to work with them. And like most of us that have done this a long time, I've also got the other side of working with some people that were like, whoa. And so in most of my career has been in teaching institutions, and not only having some research, but training residents and fellows, and to see the residents, evolve and become surgeons, and then to keep in touch with some of them over the years and hear how they're doing. I feel it's been really, really fortunate to have done that.
Sure.
Without a doubt, Dr. Cooley was phenomenal. I sit there and I look at some of the stuff we did. I can remember when I was first starting out and looking at some of these poor babies with the congenital defects and looking in that chest that didn't even look like a heart, and he would just go in there and figure it out and know exactly what to do. And what I've realized over the years is, to be a congenital surgeon, you've got to see and think in 3D, which
Yes.
I honestly don't. I'm pretty 2D as far as when I see stuff, and that they can see how this empty heart's going to fill up and how the baffle's got to be and everything. Just still to this day amazes me that they can do that. And I don't do kids. I haven't done kids. In Seattle, we have one children's hospital that does all the kids, and I miss doing kids because there was nothing better than to see this little blue baby roll in and leave pink.
Sure.
And
sure.
to see the family afterwards, and it was always tough when a baby died. But the beautiful thing about kids is they get well, and when they don't, they die.
Yeah.
And they don't linger in the ICU for 3 months, as we see with adults. And so as tough as some of those cases were, luckily the majority of them, they did great. And to know that they were going to have good, productive and healthy and normal lives was just so rewarding to me.
Sure. I think it's fair to say that nobody wants the surgeon to succeed as much as the perfusionist.
I do. And that's one of the things that I have just really pushed over the years, and luckily at the University of Washington, Dr. Verrier has been very supportive. And cardiac surgery is a team sport, Granted, the off-pump thing came in, but he always said, I can't do this without the pump, And I always had the attitude, nobody's going to come and just say, put me on the pump just for the heck of it, and to work with that. And then, the anesthesiologist, such a vital component of the team, and the nurses. And so, it truly is a team sport that we can do this.
Well, you've anticipated a question later down the list, and that is teamwork. Do you have anything else you would like to say about how teams work together? Obviously, as the chief perfusionist, you've got to manage a large team. Have you learned any tricks of the trade over the years?
I have. When you ask that question, I smile, because I remember when I got to the University of Washington, and there was a lot of changes that need to be made. I'm the second chief perfusionist there, and I hope that I don't do this in my career, but I think my predecessor kind of retired a few years before he actually quit, and hadn't, I don't think, kept up. And that's I'm not saying that negatively. I think we all get to that. You get comfortable and it's working, so why change anything at that point? And so I made a lot of changes, and I made them in a hurry. And one of my colleagues who's still there today, he's the only person who's still there from when I got there, and he looked at me and he says, boss, everything you did was right, but God, you did it wrong. And I've learned a lot, and I think it's very important with a perfusion team, especially, that you have good communication, that you talk about things. We have a joke at our staff meetings that everybody's got to vote, and I have 12. But I've also learned, don't be stupid. If 11 people are telling you something and you're the only one that's disagreeing with them, maybe it's you this time, not them.
Sure.
And so, I think in the OR, teamwork's very important, that you communicate, that you're respectful of one another, that everybody knows what they're doing and can help one another, not, that's not my job, pitch in and help, because, ultimately it's about the patient. It's not about your job or anything else. It's about that patient.
Yes.
And then in the perfusion team, I look around and I think we're very weird people that do this. You think about it, we're the only people that I know of where somebody totally, literally says, I'm going to place my life in your hands.
Yes.
But they've probably never met you. And we get this opportunity to care for people in a way that hardly anybody else does.
Largely goes unknown.
True, and unappreciated. And so we do this, and maybe the surgeon says thank you. And so I think we've got to be unique individuals that can, give ourselves our own attaboys and realize what we do and take care of ourselves in that way. But then you put all these weird personality types into a group, and it's like, wow. And so just learning how to read people and try to manage people and I think the hardest thing for me was learning how to listen to people. Has helped me a lot over the years. And I hope when I retire, he'll say everything you did was right and you learned a lot too.
It's beautifully expressed, Craig. Not an easy thing to do, to manage a team that large. One other quick question on teamwork. You mentioned a staff meeting. How often do you, with the case load, it must be difficult to schedule staff meetings, but how often do you typically try to bring the team together for a staff meeting?
We have it on the calendar once a month, and probably most of the time they get canceled. We have them when we need them. Because our schedule is so hectic, and we've got 3 hospitals to cover, to get everybody together. And so, I've had my hand slapped by the Joint Commission on one visit that I don't have enough staff meetings. But I also think valuing people's time is important, and just to have a staff meeting to say we did it, I don't always do. But we've, have other ways to communicate. We have a communication book, obviously now email is great. We have a common voicemail that we can leave messages for one another. So we communicate well, but every once in a while we do just all have to get together and talk.
Well, I want to shift gears now a bit and ask you again, from a global perspective, as you look back over the several decades, what major changes that you witnessed stand out in your mind as being truly significant and leaps forward? Wow,
there's been so many. When I think about it, I started, my first oxygenator was a Travenol 6LF,
The infamous bag.
And to look at what we use now, and how, so, obviously the evolution in equipment is one of the bigger ones, but I think more importantly than that, because we obviously weren't killing people using bubbler oxygenators and everything else, and I remember all the debates at the meetings, which is better, and people say, well, I use membranes on the sicker patients and stuff, and I'm sitting there going, shouldn't be giving the same care to everybody, and all those arguments that we've had. But I just think probably to narrow down is just this understanding of what we're doing, what's going on, the physiology of bypass, how we're triggering inflammation, what we're doing to blood cells, has helped make this a much safer mode of caring for patients. Just looking at the fact that we can do ECMO now and have patients on the pump for weeks.
Yes.
That would have never happened before. 3 hours was like the end of the world. I look at cardioplegia. I talk with residents and they have no idea what stone heart is. And sadly, we saw that way too often. So cardioplegia is such an advance. Some of the instrumentations, and now I'm looking at this whole deal with the valves, that they're going to do them in the cath lab,
Yes.
Nobody would have dreamed of that,
No.
40 years ago. And so it's hard to pinpoint. There's just been so many. But again, as I said, if I had to try to pinpoint it down, I would say it'd be an understanding of the physiology. As I said, our 6 months, there wasn't a lot to learn because we really didn't know what we were doing. We got by with it. And now I think we have an understanding, and that's where some and a lot of the improvements have come from.
It's very well expressed. And if I could paraphrase, blood management techniques are really very important today, aren't they?
Oh, they are indeed. I mean, as I said, we used to give blood. I mean, I remember, priming with blood, and then, then if you had to give it, and then it was whole blood, and now looking at this, and now understanding that blood is a transplant, and all the reactions that come with that is very important. I think, I don't know which one came first, but I mean, the understanding of that, and then trying to miniaturize the circuits, trying to decrease prime, the wrapping, all have played. And so, which one comes first and stuff, but we keep learning and adding on, and then we learn something else and we keep adding on. And, I hope that, when I retire, that I will still keep up with the field and just continue to see advances made.
Well, I have no doubt that you will. And I have no doubt that you'll be still mentoring people after you hang up your tubing.
I hope so.
Now, you alluded to mini circuits, which really anticipated my next question. What is your thought on so-called mini CPB, Craig?
Well, I have publicly said in the past, I have reservations about it. I think there's a part that we can get so far.
The vibration there. If you want to restart answering the question, sorry.
You want me to repeat the question?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead and just repeat the question.
So Craig,
Just throw that over there.
sorry. Craig, I'm going to throw out a phrase to you. Mini CPB. What are your thoughts about mini CPB?
Well, I have publicly said, and I've given talks on it, and one of the more infamous, debates we've had at an AmSECT meeting was Al Stammers and I, pro and con on mini circuits. The idea of reducing prime, I think, is a wonderful idea. But this idea of how little, it's how far can you stretch the envelope, I guess, to where you start compromising safety. And one of my big fears is if it gets too small, the reaction time. I mean, we're still talking, we've got humans running the pump, and so you need reaction time. And if it gets too small, or you now possibly, becoming unsafe, that you don't have the reaction time to handle something should it happen. We keep trying to combine things, and if a component, for whatever reason doesn't work in the middle of a case, how can we change that? And so I think when we start looking at modifying our circuits in any way, we've got to try to think of all the possibilities and scenarios that come with it. And, sometimes I get a little frustrated with the manufacturers that, these engineers who have never been in an operating room come up with these ideas, and on paper it sounds great. Mm-hmm. But clinically, practically, they're not the ones sitting back there. And my line is usually, it might be good for something, but it's not good for my coronaries.
Sure.
And so I think, that's where the role of the clinicians got to stay involved in making sure that as we make these advancements, they not only, answer one problem, but don't cause more problems.
Well, it's almost as if you've looked at the set of questions, because this segues into the next question, and that is, and you've alluded to it a bit in your previous answer, but what is your view generally of the cardiopulmonary industry?
I think it's stagnant right now.
And why is that?
I mean, you go in the exhibit hall and there's really nothing new.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything. We're at the meeting, the exhibit's just open, so I haven't really spent a lot of time. But I mean, I hear of nothing new or anything. And part of it is I don't have any new ideas to tell them to go make either right now. And but overall, I think the clinicians in the industry have done a great job in partnering with one another. As I look back, I love the days when we had 7 oxygenator companies, and we've seen the mergers and the buyouts and the consolidation of these companies, which at least we still have enough to have some competition and, hopefully some research and development going on. But it's a tough business. And when I talked about the FDA earlier, the regulations of the FDA, and this is nothing outstanding, we all know this, has made it very hard for a company to bring new product to market. And so I think right now we do have a good relationship with our industry partners, and hopefully that will continue, and there will be some more innovation coming in the future. But again, I can't blame them because I don't have any great ideas to tell them to go do something either.
Very good. In your career, Craig, have you personally mentored perfusionists either at your hospital or in a different venue? Are you affiliated as a teaching site or clinical affiliation site for any of the training programs?
We're not. The university right now currently isn't, and that's a lot of political stuff at the university that they don't want to be bringing in students from other schools. Fortunately, I did teach at Texas Heart for a number of years and got to teach a lot of students, and which I love doing. One of the things when I went to the University of Washington in '87 was the possibility of starting a perfusion school, and then when we did the business plan, it just was turned down. That it was too costly for the number of students that we would be training, and at that point in time, we weren't sure we needed another school in the country. The idea has recently resurfaced at the university, and so there's a possibility that we'll be starting school again.
Well, I think you would be ideal in that role, and I hope it comes to fruition for you.
It would be great to have something out west. There's nothing in the West Coast schools right now.
There isn't. At one time,
Arizona is the closest.
Well, at one time there was a school in Portland, but that's no longer functioning, is it?
Nope.
Now we're going to get from the global perspective. I want to prod your memory. And are there any cases that stand out, without revealing names, of course? Any memorable cases, either bad or good, that you'd like to share with those who will view your interview?
There's been a number over the years, and I think, obviously my first case as a student, being scared to death, I've never forgotten. I think some of the cases that stand out the most are, I've had I don't know if opportunity is the right word, but to pump pregnant women and then to see the mom and the baby both survive and do well, very rewarding.
Sure.
The cases where you get called in the middle of the night probably are the ones that in some ways are the most meaningful to me, that, that basically, we've taken people that would have been dead and then to watch them walk out.
Sure.
And then most recently, we've had several patients, young patients, cystic fibrosis, that we've bridged to lung transplant with VV ECMO. And to see these 20-year-olds, who would have died and knew that they were going to die, and to see them, and then these are patients that you really get to know as we stay with the ECLS patients, and then to see them walk out and return and living healthy, happy lives. It's probably some of the most rewarding stuff I'm doing now.
Very moving, isn't it?
Totally.
How did you, this is a bit of a maybe awkward question, but how did you approach a perfusion case? Let's say you get the assignment the evening before that it's a double valve, or something more than the routine coronary. What is your kind of step-by-step approach to doing a perfusion case, Craig?
My routine mode now is pretty much to read the history and physical and know what's going on with the patient and to check their labs. That's the first thing, is to know what we're doing and what challenge I'm going to have as far as hemodilution. I think after that, it's consider who the surgeon is, which will pretty much tell me how we're going to cannulate and how we're going to do this. We at the university right now, our routine's pretty similar across the board, but they all have their little idiosyncrasies, as most surgeons have. And so then it's getting the equipment ready. I am a morning person. I always try to have everything set up before the patient's in the room. Some people go for, just got to be ready by the time they saw the chest. I like to have it all ready before the patient goes in the room and be set up. And then part of that is, it's just, again, part of my routine, and then I get a cup of coffee before the case while they're putting the patient to sleep. But it's also gives me the opportunity, if somebody else needs some help or something, I'm free to help them.
Sure.
And then being at the university, we'll have several rooms running. I can also help my colleagues, and because we've got a lot of younger perfusionists that will have questions and stuff, and so I see that as part of my role. And then it's a matter of, and this was even before we had the timeouts and everything, to talk with the surgeon and just make sure that we're on the same page, and what's he going to do today to make sure that there's nothing that I missed or something that he's got it. And then it's just being ready and trying to anticipate. I always tell the younger perfusionist, I said, your goal really is that they ought to think you're the laziest guy in this room that just sits there and turns knobs. And I said, and the reason that is because you've anticipated everything that you can possibly need,
Well expressed, very well expressed.
And so that's pretty much part of it. And then, my personal side, I always say a prayer before we go on. And,
Really?
And I pray for the patient, for the surgeon, for me, that we'll do well. And
thanks for sharing that. So I think you've touched on it, but I'm gonna ask it from a slightly different angle, and that is, what do you, again, if I was a new perfusionist, new to the field, what would you convey to me as important attributes for being a good perfusionist, Craig?
That's a great question, and I really wish, because I keep trying to, as I'm hiring a lot of new grads right now, what to say to them to motivate them. Yesterday, and I congratulate you again on the Gibbon Award. You said something about don't be a pump your case and go home type of perfusionist. So that's, I think, is one of the first things. And what I try to do is instill into young people that there is so much to learn and so many possibilities, and just to keep looking around and make yourself available. Ask where you can help, because when you help, you can learn something.
It's also good for job security, isn't it?
Well, that too. But I mean, I love getting calls, from somebody in some other department that will call me at the university. They're doing something, and they heard I run a pump or something. Would I have a pump that could do this? And I go, well, I don't know. Let me see. And just go see what they're doing in their research lab and everything. Has just been great. And I mean, and a lot of the research I did was tag along with other people, and either was able to get something else out of it on a different course than they were originally designing their study for, but we could extrapolate that data, or just to be with them and learn from them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key. I mean, I remember hearing George Bashir talk at the Medical University of South Carolina once, and he started his talk as fellow students, and he said something that we've got to always be students. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to keep that there's always something else to learn, and just keep going. And I mean, one of the goals that I had early in my career was I wanted to make some type of contribution that would change the world of cardiopulmonary perfusion. And it was like, okay, Gibbon beat me to inventing the machine, but what can I do? And I still think about that, and the work that we did with perfluorocarbons, trying to come up with a blood substitute, and the latest thing I was doing was a cytokine filter, just something that's going to have this big impact. And unfortunately, I haven't come up with it yet, but it's, I think, given other ideas, and someday it's going to come. And I think that's part of doing research is that we never know what the results are going to be. If we did, we wouldn't have to do the research. But out of it comes something. It might not have been what we expected, but out of it will come something else. And
Sure.
I that's what I try to instill. Just that. And then the other thing is what we talked about earlier, that you're giving this opportunity as a perfusionist to do something that nobody else gets to do. There's 3,800 of us in the United States, probably 6,000 of us in the world, and we get to do this.
Yes.
And when you think about that, that's just awesome.
It is.
It is. And,
Very eloquently expressed. So again, segueing into the next question on my list, Craig, what has it meant to you to have been a perfusionist?
Wow, Mark. I look back, and I'm not sure. I don't know.
Is it too immediate?
I don't know how to express it. I mean, it's meant so many things in so many different ways. As I said, I look at the people I've got to work with, that I could say that I worked with Dr. Cooley, and it's really interesting now to talk to the residents, and they look at me like, "You'd worked with Dr. Cooley," and it's like, yeah, and I was like, no big deal, like, you better be there, you better. I've been fortunate because of both the research and my involvement in AmSECT. I've traveled the world and I've met perfusionists all over the world and been to hospitals all over the world, and just what I got to learn there and the friendships that I've made over the years. And I mean, my wife always kids about, how do I know about somebody on the East Coast? And I joke, there's telephone, telegraph, and teleperfusionist. I mean, we are such a small community.
Sure.
And overall, like any family, we've had our battles in perfusion over the years. I mean, I have it in my staff. We've had it in AmSECT. We've had it. But overall, I don't think there's anybody I know that I couldn't call and they would help me.
Sure.
And I think that is probably one of the things that has meant the most, But it's a weird profession. I mean, I think about, and you know this as well as I do, the times we get called in and have to leave some family gatherings or something. I mean, the Christmases I've missed because I got called in to go take care of a stranger. But yet, I get to do that, and it's like, I'm not going to say I haven't cursed in the middle of the night or thrown a pager across a room or anything, but it's like, when I stop and think about what I get to do, it's just awesome. I just don't know how to really put it into words.
Sure. Well, I have to insert a little anecdote that happened to me a few years ago in Beijing, a city of 20 million plus.
I remember it well.
And I was in the Summer Palace, throngs of people, thousands of people, and somebody's yelling, Mark, and it's Craig Vocelka. I mean, who would have thought that the two of us would link up in Beijing, totally oblivious that each of us were there? It was really an amazing moment.
It was. I remember looking at it and going, no.
Again, moving right along, I think you've expressed this in some aspect. I want to re-ask it. What have been the most personally satisfying things to you, Craig, over the years in being a perfusionist?
I think...
Was it working with AmSECT, or was it more on the perfusionist patient aspect?
I really think it was the teaching aspect.
Teaching.
It was working with students at Texas Heart. It's been working with residents at the University of Washington. Teaching, trying to share some of my knowledge and expertise and experiences with them. And to get that call every once in a while from a former student or a former resident calling to ask you a question because they say, I know you know this, and that somewhere I impressed upon them, A, that you can call anytime, B, that we're here to help one another. And just, I think that's been the most rewarding. some of the cases definitely had some rewards. Like I talked about some of the pregnant women that we've done and the babies that I used to do. But I think overall, it's probably been the teaching and the see the growth and that somebody else is interested in and wants to do this has been the most rewarding.
So we're near the end of this interview. Is there any area that we've not covered that you would like to say some words about? Or are there any comments you'd like to make to the younger generation of perfusionists today before we wind up this interview, Craig?
Well, we haven't talked about, perfusionists in professional societies, being at the AmSECT meeting and having this here, and being a past president of AmSECT, I would feel, that I left that out. And I would just say that, that people need to support their professional societies. And I'm not even going to pick one, but they just do. And I mean, and nothing else, it's a chance, again, to share knowledge and to share experiences. I keep looking at meetings and where we're going today. And I mean, one of the things that, we keep talking about, do we need to do more education online and everything? And last night I was with some friends and we were talking, it started out as grabbing a beer and just catching up. And then this guy asked me if I'd ever done this kind of case. We spent an hour and you learn more, I think, sometimes in the bar or at the pool or something than we do in the lectures. Not to say those aren't important and we can skip them, but I just think this one-on-one communication, and again, I think that's where perfusion is so good, that we are such a small community. It doesn't have to be at a meeting. We can pick up the phone and call. But I would just say it's very important that people support the professional organizations by attending the meetings, by their membership, so that the field can keep growing, that none of us do this independently, and that we need each other to help grow and take care of people.
Very well expressed. Now, as a follow-up to that, do you think that the Perf List or Perf Mail blog is equivalent to exchanging war stories over a cup of coffee at a meeting one-on-one?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Expand on that, would you?
First of all, I realize we have to do it, but I hate email because emails get so misinterpreted.
Yes.
You never know what somebody's saying, and we've all read Perf List where somebody says something and then either gets attacked or everybody goes off on some tangent or something. So it's not the same at all. You can't clarify, you can't re-express, I'm not saying this right, type deal. So no, it's not at all. And then what scares me the most about Perf List is people take it as the Bible. Well, it was on Perf List, so it's got to be right. And I don't want to sound like an old fogey, but I mean that's the negative side of all this electronic communication, the internet and everything is, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, which in some ways gets back to the professional societies. We need the journals, we need peer review, we need to support each other and to make sure that what we're saying is true and that these techniques are tested, that we try and stuff.
Sure. Well, as predicted, we're coming up on 60 minutes. This has been wonderful, Craig. I really have enjoyed
it was an honor.
Asking these questions and hearing. And I will tell you that of the interviews we've done, everyone is different. Everybody's got a little different take on the same set of questions, and I really appreciate you sharing your perspectives today. And hopefully these interviews will be available to the wider audience via the AmSECT website. So are there any closing comments you'd like to make?
No, I think that would be great. I think, what you just said reinforces that we're a bunch of unique individuals trying with a common goal, is to provide good, safe care for patients and to grow the field. But we are unique and we are, in many ways, weird to be doing this when you think about it.
Well, thank you very much, Craig.
No, thank you. It's an honor.